sense. Then, but every you can join us through the Facebook or webinar is also this join us Okay. My question. So you see, basically, back to communication, I need to communicate that I have it.
Morning, everyone.
When I communicate, hopefully, people I communicate.
Hello, and welcome to Analyst Data Services Nigeria's Macroeconomic Outlook for 2025. I want to say thank you to each and every one of us for being here today. I also want to thank our special guest, the panel chair, Professor Uluaja, for being here with us, and our presenters and our panelists for today. Thank you for making this a priority, and we're grateful to have you. Today, we'll be discussing turning reforms to citizen gains in the mid-term year. We have our keynote presentation from one of our principal economists, Mr. Dr. Shengu. After which we will have the discussion session with three panelists. We have Honorable Akintunde Oyebode, Dr. Yinka Babalola, and Dr. Joseph Ogebe. They will be taking us through their perspective on the theme of the discussion. I know it's going to be a very interesting session. Yeah, so let's get ready for that. But before we start, I would just want to leave us with the ground rules for today's webinar. The first thing is I would like us to rename our Zoom with our full name and organization. And also let's ensure that our microphones are muted, except the microphone of the speakers. Only the speakers are allowed to have their cameras on during the webinar. Also, interruptions are not allowed during the presentation. So if you have questions during the presentation, just drop them in the chat box. They will be treated after the discussion session. Participants are also allowed to ask questions in the question and answer session, which will come up after the panelist session. Let's make use of the hand raising icon if you have any question. And let's ensure that we adhere to these ground rules so we can have a seamless and each webinar this morning. So once again, I welcome you all. If you have questions or any clarifications, just drop them. We'll also be live streaming on our YouTube channel. The live stream is on already, so just visit youtube.com at @HRNG/streams. You can see that we are live already. Thank you very much. I would like the chairman will give us his opening remarks now. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you again for joining us in this webinar. It's a privilege to moderate, although I'm supposed to chair, but I'm moderating this particular webinar. This is a very timely event because, like has been said,
identify the bucket that is leaking. The bucket
hello, there are interruptions. Everybody, I think, like I've been advised, please mute your mic until you are invited to speak, so that your own engagements will not interrupt the discussion on the platform. So, like I was saying, this is a very topical and timely event by data the analysts and data resources, limited. In particular, because we have a government that is in place that is now mid-term, and it is just timely to take a look at what has happened and then see what is likely to follow, what has to be done to make sure that the desirable outcomes, are realized. This particular, seminar
you broke this, your hunger, you're shaking. Yes, weakness me as a human being. Everybody, any weakness. Your own weakness is humanizing. You are not sharing weakness.
And can the host mute everybody? Because we keep on hearing these private discussions, which is not meant for this platform. And it will be very important because when presenters and speakers are on, we don't want interruptions, through private discussions. Please mute your phone if you are not, your microphone if you are not the one speaking. So like I was about to conclude, because this was supposed to be a brief remark, mainly to welcome members to this important session, but to say that you know we should actually encourage many more of this type of webinar by the AD, RS, so that we can begin to benefit from the detailed data and the analysis that they carry out, and then maybe contribute to the process of getting our country to the desirable state. So, like has been said, we shall have a major presentation by Dr. Sheinbo, and then we have panel discussion. Thereafter, we then throw it open to floor discussion and contribution by your distinguished selves. So once again, you are welcome to this webinar, and I would like to invite Dr. Sheinbo to please make his presentation, and then we take it on from there. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you so much, Prof. Just to be sure, sir, can we all hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. I hope others are hearing you too.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And once again, just to welcome everyone to this year's webinar. And thank you so much, Prof, for that introduction and that introductory remark. And also just to thank our panelists also who are here at this webinar. And so I'll just jump straight into our presentation at ADSR. So once again, I am Dotun Sheinbo from ADSR, and I'll be doing this presentation just to set the background before we then have our panelist perspective on this important topic. So basically, this is the rundown, the outline. Just as Professor Ajakai mentioned, we believe at ADSR that 2024 was an exciting year. There were several reforms that the current administration introduced to, of course, improve the well-being of Nigerians. However, of course, as many of us share, not all Nigerians share that sentiment, particularly as it regards to the progress and quite a lot of disagreements as to, okay, were these reforms effective? Were they doing what they should do and all that? And consequently, we believe that 2025 marked an important year for this current administration, particularly for them to show and demonstrate that these reforms actually will deliver the expected benefits. And we also believe strongly that this year, being the mid-year sort of for this administration, their second year, political considerations might limit the administration's policies choices if they do not take very serious steps to make sure that policies, the effectiveness of the policies and reform initiatives that they've rolled out would show meaningful and tangible benefit in the life of the citizens. We believe this is more like a test year for them. And as this administration advances beyond this mid-year, it might become very tough, relatively tougher for them to then show some of these results that we look at. And where we believe strongly that having these conversations at this point is important, as this might lead to possible policy or reform reversals if politicians or policymakers begin to see that. And we know the implication of that, particularly if we consider that reforms typically is costly. So and all of that. And so basically we would go through this presentation just to do a brief background on the key reforms, notable reforms in 2024. We look at some of the initial adjustments that this had on or the initial adjustments that Nigerians had to put themselves through businesses and all of that. And then we look at some outlook for year 2025 or based on what we have seen at ADSR. So just to refresh our mind, major happenings or highlights of major reforms in 2024. Of course, as we all know, every Nigerian became economist suddenly in 2024 and discussing devaluation, exchange rates harmonization, and all of that. So that was one important reform that was introduced. We had PMS subsidy, removal of energy subsidies, particularly for petrol and electricity, all happened also in 2024. There were also reform initiatives to strengthen the Nigerian fiscal financial system through the new recapitalization benchmarks for banks. And there were also intensified efforts to curb insecurity. There were a lot of initiatives that was introduced. There's also the conversation around the tax reform that was proposed, that we saw some of the elements of the proposed reforms later last year. And also there is the direct payment of federation allocation to local governments. Also, social welfare. There are a number of social welfare and credit policies that the federal government also tried to introduce, palliatives to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. For example, there are a lot of palliatives that were distributed through states to citizens. We have the NEL Fund, we have the NCCC. So these are interesting reforms that we believe shaped the macroeconomic, the Nigerian economic landscape as far as 2024 is concerned, and then the minimum wage policy as well, and of course the presidential initiative. So we just selected these reforms, and we felt these are like the major key highlights in terms of reforms as far as 2024 is concerned. So, how did this reform sort of, what are the initial adjustments? How did Nigerians, how did business, what were the initial pains that came with this reform? Typically, we know that reforms of this nature, they're sort of stubborn, although there are conversations around whether it could have been better sequenced and all of that. But in terms of the immediate effect of some of these reforms, they're both good and bad, but I think maybe we would agree that based on how Nigerians felt about it, it's there's more pains expectedly. So, and of course, we see this in increased energy prices and reduced purchasing power. Nigerians on the street felt this strongly, and we saw, and that of course culminated in a number of civic protests and unrest across the country. You hear the slogan, "They build power" and all of that. So those are some initial adjustments to this reform. We also experienced weaker currency, which we know has several pass-through effects to many other macroeconomic fundamentals across the country. We also saw that these policies then tend to also be highly inflationary, and of course, leading the Apex Bank to do a lot of firefighting through the successive rounds of increase in MPR that, of course, would not allow the inflation rates to come down, all of that. And on the somewhat bright side, but not totally bright, because it's just like you're getting some money and then you're not, it states fiscal capacity in some way were sort of bolstered in a way. With the currency devaluation, for example, states then now have more naira, right, from FARC, right? So, but there are conversations around whether that in itself is positive, because they then have to go back to the market that is already inflationary, right? So it's just like you're getting ₦1 from one, and then you're spending it through another channel. And then also we know that the minimum wage policy, for example, also would have implications on states' budget as well. So, and particularly for the, sorry, can you hear me? So particularly for the direct transfer of federal allocation to local government, we felt this definitely might have some, friction between states and local government. So just to describe this in terms of some specific numbers. What we then noticed, of course, in the year was that growth somewhat was resilient. We noticed at least a steady marginal increase in growth, looking at the Q1 to the third quarter growth performance of the country. It's relatively resilient, rose to 3.46 in Q3 2024 from 3.19%. But of course, as every Nigerian felt it on the street, and as I said earlier, price rose significantly from 21.82% in January 2023 to 34.19%. And yesterday was released, and there's 0.02 percentage points increase from November to December from what was released yesterday. So the fact is that price level was a major price level increase was a major after effect of these reforms, and of course every Nigerian felt it. And this was driven mainly by food price inflation and loose financial. Food price inflation, interestingly, we've seen the federal government done a lot of initiatives to try to battle the food insecurity challenge and all of that, but we haven't seen that translated into reduced inflation, and that would be some ideas that we hope we can discuss at this webinar. Interest rate has remained relatively high in response to inflation, as we all noticed, and the CBN has not, they've tried in terms of trying to firefight, but it hasn't translated into some of these bottom lines that we'd like to see, that would mean that Nigerians are experiencing better life as a result of these reforms. And of course, we also spoke a little bit about the Naira depreciation that also was a consequence of this reform. So just some slides on the petroleum prices as far as from January 2023 to October 2024. We couldn't get the updated prices for November and December, of course. We all know what happened to our NBS platform in the last few weeks. But this graph basically, of course, just helps us to understand how the trajectory had been from January. You could see from January, just about 200 plus Naira per liter petrol, and then that jumping like more than 5 times just within the year 2024. And you see that's something that every Nigerian felt. And these are also consequences, like what we like to call the initial adjustments. And we hope they remain initial adjustment and not permanent adjustments, right? And also this is just also to take us through the minimum wage, which we thought also was an important policy initiative by the federal government. We thought this was bold for them to do, particularly given the fiscal challenges that they're in. And several states have, approved, based on their capacity. We have Lagos Rivers, 85,000 minimum wage, and then we see Kano Gombe and 71,000, which of course, based on their capacity as states. So in terms of how these reforms have sort of shaped the GDP sector's performance, and basically, like I said earlier, growth remained resilient as far as the year is concerned. Of course, we can have conversations as to what drove this, whether it's the quality or the quantity, right? So whether it's because when the price, you can feel price effect also in growth numbers. So, but these are interesting conversations to have. In 2024, predominantly, we have key leading sectors, contributors to Nigerian outputs, continue to be agriculture, as ICT, trade, manufacturing. The financial and insurance sector accounts for 5.51% of the GDP, and it continues to drive the impressive performance that we've seen as far as growth is concerned. And we see in Q3 2024, we see some of our key leading sectors sort of showing marginal decline, particularly in Q4 2024. We see agriculture, we see manufacturing, and we see trade, and then we see financial and insurance, just being the poster boy all through 2024. So yeah, this also, of course, just seeing where some of these impressive performance or the performance of growth is coming from. And then these are pointers to where we probably need to channel more of our energies, more of our focus in terms of where can we get this growth? Where can we get these numbers? Where can we get, where should we focus our energies to then ensure that reform pains are transmitted into citizens' gain? But this we believe is very interesting and shows interesting patterns for 2024. So stock market performance across sectors ended positively in 2024, 37.65 all share index. We thought this was also interesting, and you see drivers in the oil and gas, and particularly that was, of course, a topical sector that also needed to respond to alleviate some of these reform pains in year 2024. And so the oil and gas index posted an impressive performance in 2024. And as we saw also from the GDP numbers, we also could see these numbers also reflecting in the NSE insurance index, for example, and then also the banking index, although the banking index faltered a little bit, but was still variable. So major gainers being companies in the oil and gas and financial services sector. So we then try to zero in on how does this event in 2024 sort of shape the budgets for 2025, particularly the proposed budget for 2025. And then for the states, most of our states have already passed their budgets, but the federal government is yet to, the president is yet to, the National Assembly, they're yet to finalize that. But we did just to try to look at what this meant. An aggregate of 49.7 trillion was proposed, and as we would see, this is not marginal, massive 14.1% increase compared to 2024 numbers. And we would see the increase in budget deficit from 9 trillion to 13 trillion. So those are interesting things to pick up from the budget, especially when we know that we're nearing that level where we're having conversations about how sustainable the increase in debt is. And capital expenditure 14.85 trillion from 7.772 trillion. So these are interesting things to look at, particularly also to look at the assumptions, the underlying assumptions. Analysts have really touched on this, and we believe at ADSR as well that these assumptions, of course, they're assumptions, but they then also can have implications on the implementation of the budget along the line. For example, with a target inflation of 15%, where the current figure is way higher than that number, then that's something to look at. Particularly also exchange rates with an assumption of 1,500 naira per dollar. So these are interesting, particularly also the oil production assumption 1.78 and 2.06. 2.06 is the underlying assumption for this budget. So we think this looking at those assumptions sometimes might make one, of course, worry about the implementation of the budget. But we feel this is also in response to the currency that has been devaluated. Of course, there's more naira into the federation account, and then they have more too. And of course, this government will still go to that same market where the price level of commodities is high. But yeah, so, and debt service also is almost doubled. If you look at it, it's 8.25 trillion, and in 2025 it's like 15.9 trillion. So we begin to see debt sustainability issues as far as our finances is concerned. So just to wrap up with some global events and outlook, in 2024, inflation declined in most economies, particularly the US. Growth performance has been resilient somewhat, 3.3, 3.2. And then there's still geopolitical tension still persists, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and there are a lot of AI disruptions as we see, and these are events that will shape, particularly if you look at AI disruption as it also has implications on the global economy, and that we think is also very important. And we see, based on all of these events, crude oil price has steadied over time, and then also that has also helped. The crude oil price 2023 $79 per barrel, in 2024 as at October 76, not too disruptive for Nigeria's budget in particular. So basically for us also is the outlook, global growth not impressive but resilient amidst the global challenges. Not too strong growth, particularly in the fourth quarter in most Euro economies in Canada and in China. Like I mentioned earlier, global tension persists. US dollars showed impressive recovery with low inflation in the US particularly, stronger currency and steady growth. And we know what the implication of a stronger dollar would always have on how foreign capital inflow into our country in particular. And we noticed that in FPI inflow, particularly in the fourth quarter to the second half in Nigeria as well, that sort of picked up a bit also with the inflation. But as the US economy starts to rebound, we see there might be some reversal in some of these, some reversal of those foreign portfolio inflow into Nigeria, back to where, things are working well. So, but generally, this is what the outlook look like in sub-Saharan African countries. Growth is expected to steady. And also the Trump election that also will have, so there's this conversation around whether the world is going towards protectionism again. Trump is proposing to slam Canada, China, Mexico tariffs, and in fact is planning to set up what they call external revenue service. It felt like internal revenue services accounting for taxes within the US economy, but like an external revenue service will account for tax for proceeds from tariff that he is going to impose on these countries. And we know this can sort of also further heighten that tension in that global stage. And these are interesting things to look out for. In some sense, it also could have both positive and negative effect for the Nigerian economy, but these are interesting things that we see will happen. It is expected that the Nigerian economy in particular will end the year in the positive territory, but we believe this is contingent upon turning some of these reforms into pain. Largely in the global stage, growth in near term continues to be weak, still halfway from the growth experienced in 2021. So we've talked a lot about this, political upheavals, and so particularly in France and Germany, where they're trying to sort out their internal politics. We think this would have very interesting effect on the global economy at large. So zooming in on reform pains to citizens' gains, for us at ADSR, just have a couple of ideas on the table that, and we feel like, first, more transparency in the management of subsidy, whatever fiscal savings or whatever fiscal benefits from that process. There's been conversations around whether there's savings or whether there's no savings, but whatever we're able to scrape up from that process, more transparency would be very, very important. And it is important for the current government to build foundation for improved productivity and to drive export-led growth, particularly to take advantage of the devalued currency. We think this is very important. We haven't seen much activity on that front, but we think these are areas to really look at. Couple financial sector growth with real sector expansion through adequate lending and advisory. We believe this is also important to rethink industrial policies, particularly focusing on linking micro and small enterprises with large firms. This is a big issue as far as Nigeria is concerned, particularly when you look at our labor force statistics that post that about 80-something% are in self-employed space. That I believe that is where the problem is. And at AGSR, that's the point we try to make. And the fact that you have 80-something% in self-employed, particularly one person, that is where most Nigerian workers are trapped. So we need to start, doing a lot of linking these nano firms, as we call them, nano firms, very micro firms. How are we linking them with the large firms, so that they can benefit from the organizational efficiency in large firms? We think this is important. Monitor reform success in particular. For example, the currency devaluation. How are we communicating the impact of these policies? We should be bold to take policies. We should also be bold to scale back when reforms are not working. That's boldness should not be just one-sided. It should be on both sides. You're bold to do, and then you're bold to scale back and to admit if they're not working as intended. We think this will help the current administration to move from reform pains to citizens' gains. I'd like to just, but these are just a couple of ideas that ADSR is looking at as far as, moving from this reform pains to citizens' gains. So also for the private sector, there are a lot of opportunities that this current challenge, if I would use that word, sort of present. First is, it then says businesses now start to look at opportunities that help them to save Forex. Whatever helps you save foreign currency should drive your strategy. So like looking inwards for like local sourcing of raw materials, and whatever also help you gain Forex as a local business, that also helps, leveraging the export markets. Like these are interesting opportunities, and we believe these are interesting times for Nigerian businesses, and focusing on opportunities for cost reduction, like we mentioned. For example, if energy prices are increasing, how can businesses, these are times that innovative businesses are birthed in societies, and we think there are opportunities in all of these places. And of course, this is also to say that government also need to then help businesses that are interested in these areas by making sure the space is conducive for them to explore these opportunities in this area. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this is enough to set the stage for the conversation that will happen shortly. Thank you so much. Professor Ajakai, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that excellent presentation and very, very, very incisive indeed. And from my own point of view, very, very comprehensive. You started very well with the listing of the reforms, very comprehensive. Nine were actually identified, and then you moved on to telling us about the uh, effects of these reforms on the macro, on the key macroeconomic indicators like GDP growth rates, inflation, and things like that. And then the stock market, was not ignored, although some of us feel that stock market is actually on its own, it's in its own bubble. Because like you see, when you are trying to link the performance of the stock market to the economy, it was very tenuous, very, very tenuous. I hope as we move along, we shall get to a point where development in our stock market will actually be mirroring developments in the economy. But a lot of speculative activities go on there among people who have access to resources of various types, such that it is on its own, and the link to the economy is a little bit tenuous. Hopefully, as we move on, that will not be the case. Then you moved on to this very important issue of the budget, and you call it budgeting for the citizens, 2025 budget in particular, and the key parameters there are discussed. Assumptions of the budget, behind the budget articulation, which is still in the process with the National Assembly. You did a very copious, review of that, and then of course for emphasis, in addition to the price of oil, there are issues of targets or instruments versus outcomes, because part of the assumption is that they want to bring down inflation from 34.6% or so to 15%. But that is really not is not an instrument. So you cannot make that one an assumption. It's a result of what you do. I thought we should also point that out, that in the rendition, I'm sorry, in the articulation, knowing the people in charge in the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, they must have taken, inflation as a result. But when they are now presenting it, they are making it appear as if it's part of the instrument. It's part of the, target instrument, but it is not. It's the result. So if they succeed in doing all they want to do, then what they are saying, therefore, is that inflation rate should go down to
Hello, Prof. It seems you're muted, sir.
who muted it? Somebody
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't know. Maybe somebody muted me. So you mean you have been muted from the beginning?
No, we heard
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay, all right. I can see that it just muted me automatically. Maybe. So anyway, like just as not to spend too much time trying to summarize an already excellent presentation, I like the thrust on at least giving us the global context within which Nigeria will have to perform in this year in particular, and the challenges in the OECD countries, politically and economically, the challenges of a new leadership in the United States, and the tendency to start going towards protectionist policies, how that is likely to affect the global economy within which Nigeria we have to do the best for itself. Is a very good one, and I like your concluding remark in the direction of what we expect to be the benefits citizens, and what must government do to actually intensify and accentuate these benefits. I want to zero in on a particular one which you raised very well. This issue of rethinking our industrial policy. The current thinking is that the small and medium enterprises are competing with large ones, which we have been, sold that kind of storyline since 1986 in particular, when we started the social adjustment program. They demonized the large scale farms and then glorified the small scale farms, that they are more efficient, they are better, they are so on. But we have seen that when large scale farms collapse, the small scale guys also in fact, they had to fight, they died off also. So this is your suggestion that we should now rethink the link. Instead of competitive, let's think of complementarity, and it will be in the line of the development of a very strong, solid domestic value chain, which we need to actually get the economy to be dynamized and more inclusive, and therefore the GDP growth rate which have been seen coming from that kind of industrial, policy perspective, will begin to reflect on the livelihood of people, and that's where the citizens gain to become very, very accepted. And I like the finishing point, which is government should not be dogmatic. I like the way you pass it as bold, but sometimes leaders are very sensitive to type of words. It's good for them to be bold on both sides, but I think to be more neutral, maybe we can just say, let's just be pragmatic. When things are going well, we keep it, but keep on watching. As soon as things are not going well, we then ensure that we are not dogmatic about it. We feel free of be ready, reconsider what is not working, and it will be evidence based. And with the ADSR, certainly you are in the forefront of providing the data to show that things analytically, that things are going direction that we like, or maybe not exactly there, and then flagging the need to reconsider. And then once it becomes sustained, then you should reconsider and feel free to. So that is very, very key. On all other points you raised, they are well in space. So now the next step now is to have inputs from our panelists. The first panelist, who do we want to ask to go first among our panelists? Doctor, because the names of the panelists,
All right. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. So we want Honorable Akintunde Oyebode to go first.
Okay. Honorable, okay.
Chairman Forum of Commissioner of Finance in Nigeria.
Very good.
So we want him to go first. He has just 8 minutes. Let's hear his perspectives on these issues.
Thank you very much. Honorable, over to you.
Please, let's check if it's online. If it's not,
It's online.
we can go to, maybe he dropped off or something. Let's maybe.
Okay, if he's not online, I think Dr. Yinka Babalola can have a say now.
Dr. Babalola?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly now.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this webinar. It's nice to see Dr. again. It's been a while. Yeah, so thank you for that very good presentation that kind of basically gave a broad outline of what has happened, well, since this administration came into office, but specifically in the last year. I would have loved for the commissioner to speak before I did, so that we could just get the perspective of the states on all these issues. But I will try and speak from the perspective of the civil society, specifically for those of us that work in the transparency and accountability space with respect to, for example, how the budget is implemented and how it's even prepared, across the states and the federal government. So Otto has already outlined, all the macro variables, essentially their overall trends, whether they're positive or negative, and what this implies for the economy. So I won't repeat that. I will just look at the budget specifically and link that to the other macro variables when necessary. So looking at the proposed 2025 budget, it's not very different from previous budgets. First of all, the budget usually has a title that signifies something positive intended for the economy. The main difference in this budget is actually its size. It's the largest budget we've ever seen. And, for those of us that work in the accountability and transparency space, we wonder about the credibility of the budget, because we have a tendency in Nigeria to prepare budgets, implement the budgets, and then in preparing the budget for the next year, we don't look at the actual performance to kind of decide what kind of parameters we're going to set for the next budget. So there seems to be a disconnect, between this proposed budget and the 2024 budget, which is still being implemented. So the size of the budget for me is, I think it's I'm talking about the federal budget here. It's a major source of concern given the performance of the 2024 budget. And that is also linked to the capacity of the government agencies, for example, that are going to facilitate the implementation of the budget, and also even the capacity of the private sector organizations that are going to deliver the projects that are outlined in the budget, because, those budgets have to be delivered by specific companies that operate in Nigeria and outside Nigeria, and their capacity to do that within our current environment. So that's one concern. And I think for me, from the level of from the perspective of the civil society that represent communities on the ground, especially those communities that have been historically marginalized, when we look at the budget and when we look at the macro variables, the question is really, how does this affect people on the ground? What is the link between the macro and the micro? Because saying that, we're seeing a positive trend in GDP, it doesn't really mean anything to somebody that can't afford to eat, to clothe themselves, to shelter themselves, to transport themselves. And unless these issues that make that connection possible are addressed, it's going to be more of the same. We're going to have another webinar next year to discuss, and we're going to discover that, as usual, a lot of the projects are not being implemented the way they should. A lot of the policy pronouncements that are being made are not having positive impact on the lives of the citizens. So for me, I think that there's some key things we need to take into consideration. So first of all, in preparing the budget is for the people. Therefore, the people should be part of the preparation process. My organization, International Budget Partnership, produces an open budget survey every 2 years, and the last one was for last year. And we saw that Nigeria had slipped when it came to citizen participation. So essentially, citizens are not part of this preparation. Lip service played to this, even sometimes at the subnational level, where, for example, town halls are held, but at the same time, we see that still, even with those efforts, it's not as far-reaching as it should, and the interests of the citizens are not represented in the budget. Transparency is a key issue. Right now, luckily, I think the Budget Office just released the second quarter budget implementation report. For a long time, for a long time, we could only get access to 2023 reports. The portal operated by the OAGF that allows us access to data currently is not operational. So transparency in terms of having access to information in a timely manner and in a manner that people can access is a key problem. And then oversight of the budget. We all know what happens, at the level of the legislative arm of government in terms of oversight. And of course, the Office of the Auditor General, which is still operating with a 1956 Act and a few paragraphs in the Constitution, is not empowered to do its work of oversight. And this has implications for the delivery of the budget. Aside from this, there are other things that we need to consider. Now we're talking about tax reforms. Right now, we have a tax system that favors the rich and the powerful. Although there are now efforts to try and redress that with this current tax reforms, there's a lot of opposition to it. So I think we need to make sure that the tax reform review process gives us a truly progressive system that supports sustainable economic growth in the country. And then I think overarching all of this, there's a tendency for us economists to think in purely technical terms, to separate the purely technical from the political. When Dotun was speaking, he was talking about how right now in this midterm period, we're entering the political season, and then political considerations will take precedence, right, over maybe technical decisions or policy decisions that will favor the citizenry. But the truth is that at every point in time, the policy making process is political. The budget preparation process is political. There's a reason why, the budget keeps growing from year to year and does not reflect the previous year's performance. It's political. It's that document where everybody, brings their specific interest, and then it comes and is prepared into a document that at the end of the day is probably not implementable. So I think unless we address the political settlement in Nigeria and the current patronage system, we're not going to go anywhere. Because right now we can see that, things are actually getting out of control, where there is like wholesale theft of public money, and nobody's holding anyone accountable for this. The opportunities for corruption and rent seeking are they seem to be growing exponentially. And unfortunately, while there's a lot of information being put out there for citizens to hold government accountable, there seems to be a lot of apathy on the side of citizens to do that. So this participation we talk about, this transparency, it's not going to happen automatically unless citizens actually, take up their role to make government accountable. And that's the only way that we can develop policies that work for people, a budget that delivers for the people in terms of services, in terms of goods, services like being able to go to your primary health care center to get maternal health services, for people that are doing subsistence agriculture, smallholder farmers, to get access to the tools that they need, to be able to get the extension services that they need to support their farming activities. All of these are delivered through the budget. And as long as all those leakages remain, as long as those opportunities for rent seeking continue and they continue to grow, we're not going to make any progress. So I think then maybe I can end here. I hope maybe there'll be an opportunity to speak more to very specific issues, but this is how I look at the macro situation generally in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bala, for this very, precise, contribution. In particular, your emphasis on transparency and this, if you like, bicycle approach. One budget just rolls into the other. Nobody checks what happened into the last, and therefore use that one to moderate or nuance your current budget. That seems everybody will just want to go to some kind of automatic acceleration, which you rightly pointed out. Although people on the other side can also say that when you start showing either a decline or lower pace of acceleration of things like the budget, it tends to suggest to the public
Yeah, we can go to Dr. Gebe, and then hopefully would have joined
later. Okay, fine. Dr. Ogibi, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Good to hear from you again. Dotun, also good to see you once more. And I want to thank ADSR for this opportunity to be part of this wonderful webinar. And so I will be giving my own take from the business perspective. So Dotun, Victor, you actually presented the key highlights on the implications of some of these bold reforms we saw in mid-2023 on the economy as a whole. But what we see from the business angle, a key point there was that so most businesses have actually recorded high costs as a result of these bold reforms that started in mid-2023, and it's also spilled over to 2024. For instance, the unification of exchange rates made businesses, especially manufacturing with high FX exposure, and those that import their goods, intermediate or finished intermediate raw materials and other goods. This actually added pressure on their cost side, and we see this also squeezing up their profits. And also another point again is on the subsidy removal. We all agree that yes, it's a good reform, and it was long overdue to cut down on the inefficiencies, especially on the fiscal side. But this also, we also saw some kind of adjustment cost on the business side, not just on the big businesses, but also on the nano, micro, and small businesses. Most of them complained in terms of logistics, moving their goods across the country, and they've actually experienced high cost, and this also fits into their cost structure, and it's also affecting their profit. So we see huge profit squeeze as a result of these reforms. Another point I want to also raise is in terms of as a response to the reforms, we saw inflation rising, and this also affected consumers' purchasing power. So consumer purchasing power was affected, and some of these businesses actually saw reduction in demand. Some of these businesses actually saw reduction in demand because consumers' income were actually depleted with rising costs. So that also affected businesses, and but however, some of these businesses, especially the small and micro ones, they've actually tried to change their strategy. Most of them have started adopting, local source. They started sourcing their raw materials locally just to cut costs. And we also see some trying to cut down on unnecessary spending or unnecessary costs. On the negative side, we also see some employing some strategy in terms of reduction, cutting down on number of workers. That's on the negative side. That actually will lead to job losses. So broadly, these reforms, they were actually good. They were long overdue. But I think a key point which the presentation should consider is the sequencing of these reforms and how it was implemented. For instance, in Indonesia also did something similar to this some years ago. And but they did a phase approach in such a way that the reforms, the adjustment cost or the spillover doesn't affect largely the poor and businesses. We've seen interventions in terms of the government, increasing in minimum wage to 70,000 naira. And we've also seen cash transfer, just to cushion the effects. But we've not really seen much interventions for the businesses, especially the micro and nano and small businesses. We've not really seen much interventions, and these businesses are actually struggling to survive. So let me stop there. I'll come in later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gibi, for this very interesting perspective from the business side. And I like your anchorage on the effect of the reforms, desirable as they are, or maybe inescapable as they may seem, on the environment within which the business is operating, and your emphasis on cost escalation of the various reforms, the PMS, the pricing, the exchange unification, the effort by the central bank to fight inflation by tightening and therefore raising the MPR, which automatically translate to raising interest rates, shutting out many of these nano and small and medium enterprises from the financial market, and therefore further complicating their life. And your insight on the coping mechanism that the enterprises have been adopting, which is to scale down not only by knocking off the luxurious component of their cost of production or operation, but into actually disengaging staff, as part of the response to the challenges that they face is very key. But you made a very important point, in the process, which is could we have done better by facing it, following the example of Indonesia? I think that's a very important. Of course, it's now too late because we have already done it. But the lesson of that is that when the authorities, the leadership want to consider similar reforms going forward, they should be careful, in terms of making it either lumpy or phased, which can then be in conformity with the logic of a market economy. Market economy does not operate on lumpy basis. It operates at the margin, gradual movement. So suddenly move from almost 200 to over 1,000 naira per liter PMS. It's not compatible with the market economy. I think that's the point you are making, and that's very, very key. I hope our leaders going forward we take that on to heart and manage subsequent reform efforts, in a way that the businesses can actually, adjust systematically to the reforms. Thank you very much. Well, do we have Honorable Atitude with us?
Professor, it will join, sir. I'll suggest we proceed to question and answer, and when he comes online, we will take his contribution.
All right. So the we have to help, because when people will signal their their intention to contribute by raising their hands electronically, and then we call them. So please, the floor is open now. In order to make sure that we don't, spend too much time on a particular person, let us give ourselves a maximum of 1 to 1.5 minutes, upper limit of 2 minutes. Don't represent the story, just make your own contribution, and then we can move on to the next person. So the floor is open, 1 to 2 minutes per person, please. The floor is open. Raise your hand electronically, and we recognize you. Okay, Prof. Professor Badon, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, let me thank the ADSR for making me to be part of this, good event. And I also thank, the chairman and the first speaker, I believe, to background, to the theme, which there are, the reform. The pains seem to be a bit on the extremely unbearable
your system is breaking. Okay, it's better now. I hope it stays like this. It was breaking, Yeah.
The game. One area at
I think Prof network is bad. If we
Yeah,
can have
Mm-hmm.
another person raise hand. We can barely hear him.
Yeah, we can barely hear him. I think he has dropped out actually. Or is it still on? Okay.
No, it's not off, sir.
It's off.
Yes, so the floor is open for other
next-
participants to ask questions.
So please.
Although I'm back though.
Okay, we are back. Okay. Now we had problem hearing your contributors.
Yeah,
earlier.
I think my internet was a bit unstable.
Yes, well, unstable. Yes, exactly.
Is it okay now?
I think we are hearing you now. Is everybody hearing Prof now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you now.
Okay, please go ahead.
Well, let me, if I still have the floor, I will just quickly say that one of the areas through which the reform pains can be turned into gain in the short, medium term is in the management, the handling of the exchange rate. The management of the exchange rate, liberalization of the exchange rate has brought a lot of pain, to the society and various sectors. including manufacturing, agriculture, and all that, through the pass-through effects of depreciation of the exchange rate. And over the next 1 year, it's possible. The outlook is breaking. Okay,
Please
let me
continue,
stop for
Prof.
now there.
No, please continue, Prof.
Can proceed,
That was
sir.
not from, yeah, continue, sir.
Yeah. So the point is this, that if we are able to manage the exchange rate, then aspects of the pains of the reforms, can be drastically reduced, and it would enhance productivity. It will enhance, living conditions and manufacturing output and so on. And my suggestion then is that the monetary authority should consider the question of managing the exchange rate, not just telling Nigerians that the market is determining the exchange rate. We know the weaknesses of the market under the situations of our foreign exchange market. And therefore, there are indications or signs that the oil market outlook is likely to be good, and then domestic refining capacity is improving, and therefore there should be significant savings of foreign exchange, spent on importation of if the crude oil market outlook remains the same, such that the prices over in the 70s, and if the government or produce over 1 per day intervene in the market, so much below. Mr. Chairman, I apologize, since my internet seems unstable. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Prof. Very, very, very insightful. I was going to actually ask you also to extend your discussion to the way the monetary authorities are confronting inflation by raising, the MPR, and also raising, consequentially resulting in increase in bank lending rate instead of increasing the savings deposit rate, and result of that on the inclement operational environment, both for households and for businesses. I think that is so. Thank you very much. The idea that we should not leave our foreign exchange to the market forces exclusively is very, very pertinent, and I thank you very much. And any other contribution, please raise your hand electronically so they can see. Other contributions? I've not seen any hand raised.
Professor, I would like panelists to give their thoughts about for 2 minutes before we round up.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think okay. Only we have only one hand raised, and he has spoken. Unless Prof wants to make 1 or 2 more statements. Professor Badon, you want to, because your hand is still up.
Professor Olubusoye's hand is also up now, sir.
Okay, yeah, people say, okay, please.
Good morning.
You have the floor. You have the floor. Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good morning. And let me again appreciate the presentations and the comments made so far. But my contribution will be from a different perspective. We are talking about the gains and also the pains. My worry is how we are measuring the pain in particular. And who are the subjects of the pain, which sectors? I think this is where the curious minds will have to do a lot of work to be able to also confront the policymakers with the facts and the figures regarding those who are actually in pain. We know those who are, the policies are inflicting the pains. But it's for us to generate, and I appreciate the recent initiatives of ASDR to begin to compile price data. I saw it in one of their circulars. Because that's the only way you begin to see how these policies affect food prices directly, transportation. We also need to consider education, consider other socio-economic issues. So this is the perspective and the challenge I want to put before us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Very, very, very good. That is the pure political economy analysis of reforms. The gainers and the losers. The point being made by Professor Olubutoye, if I get this right, is that the incidence of the pains may be on a cluster of the population. And when the gains start coming, is it the losers that will also actually start benefiting from the gain, or a different set of people entirely? And that's very, very important. Otherwise, you may find the problem of widening inequality, worsening, poverty, even though the gains are already coming in, because the gains are being appropriated by a different set of people as compared to those who actually suffered the pain. And I think ADRS is best placed to at least be producing the data that can be signaling to the policymakers the incidence of the pains and the beneficiaries of the gains, so that we can make sure that we don't leave out the people who suffered the pain when the benefits of whatever reform has been put in place is emerging, and that's very important for managing the reform process, managing the gainers and managing the losers. Otherwise, we have a serious problem of permanent damage and inequitable distribution of the benefits of the reforms. Thank you very much, Prof. Any other?
All right. Yes,
Yes.
so we just want one of our panelists to make points on maybe 2 key policy reforms, actions that we can take to reform these pains to gain. I want Dr. Yinka Babala to have that now.
Okay, over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. It might be a bit more than 2, but I'll go through them very quickly. So
Okay.
I think the important thing is that we need to do things differently this time. So I spoke a lot about the budget and how the needs of citizens need to be brought in to determine how we tax and spend. So we need to develop a truly progressive system. We have to stop using blunt monetary policy instruments to moderate inflation. It's obviously not working. Inflation keeps trending upwards, and meanwhile, interest rates are rising, and there's stifling economic activity and underproductive economy. Usually, you use that instrument when the economy is overheating. We can say that, look, in Nigeria, definitely that's not the issue. So I think the monetary policy authorities really need to monitor the effectiveness of their instruments and make adjustments when necessary. We also need to recognize that our import substitution approach is not yielding results. We need to grow. Our export is very clear, and there are certain bottlenecks in place that are preventing this. It all comes down to the whole corruption, rent-seeking approach, where import substitution actually allows that to flourish. And if we really want change, we need to address that. FDI, we have a lot of the president and other government officials going on foreign trips to try and crowd in foreign investment. It doesn't work that way. The capital will always come where it knows it can generate a return. And we have to really figure out, why is the capital not flowing into Nigeria? Not enough portfolio investments, which we know can even have adverse effects when there's a flight to safety, but foreign direct investment. We know we need the rule of law, we need good physical and social infrastructure, we need to address insecurity. Our workforce, do we have a well-trained workforce? What about capital controls when people want to take out their profits? Those are things that we need to consider rather than going on foreign trips. And finally, we need to dismantle or weaken this patronage system that we have set up in Nigeria, which facilitates the diversion of public funds, and the citizens need to play an active role in this. It's not going to happen overnight. There are people that are feeding fat on the resources of this country. They're not going to give it up without any pressure. So we're all tired. A lot of us have given up, but we really need to re-energize, especially for those of us that have committed to staying in the country. We're not planning to leave anytime soon. We really need to figure out new approaches and strategies to getting public officials to do their jobs. Thank you. Thank you, ADSR, for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ma. I don't know if we have Dr. Joseph Ogebe can give us his own key points too.
So thank you very much, Peace. So I'll be very fast on my side. Just maybe one or two points before we wrap up. So first, I think the government needs to be decisive on tackling macroeconomic imbalances currently ravaging the economy. A key one will be controlling inflation. Because the cost of inflation on businesses and households, we all feel that. And for the inflation, I think, there should be a deeper rethink on tackling food prices, because food prices, is one of the big culprits, pushing up the headline inflation. And for that, may not be monetary. Yes, we know the school of thought says, the monetary factor could actually influence inflation, but we also have some structural imbalances that has been with us for long. Like, for instance, we know we've been battling insecurity. We also have things on logistics, moving goods from the north to the south, even just our ports here, right? Moving from, bringing in goods through the port. Sometimes it's cheaper, or it's better to bring in goods through Togo or through Lome or Togo port than, bring it through Apapa here. So we need to actually tackle some of the structural imbalances and, to help control inflation, to help fight inflation. So another big point I want to also note will be, it's important for the government to actually consider, export-led growth. And one way they can do this is actually by, creating a good business environment for businesses to thrive. It's only when you have a good business environment that, local business, Nigerians, we are resilient. Businesses are resilient, but we need things to actually support us. For instance, power is a big problem. If you check some months, how many times do we have breakdowns? People switch. Even if we want to use diesel, it's quite expensive. Firms have actually complained about the high cost of electricity or running alternative source of energy. If you want to go solar, it's also expensive. So the government should actually take decisive step, to help us, solve the problem of power, insecurity, and other hindrances, other structural hindrances actually affecting business. Because it's only when you have a good business, only when you have a good business environment, that's when you'll be able to, produce and, export competitively. Because some other countries, they deliberately support their businesses. And, you see these countries thriving in terms of exports. They grow their economy in terms using their export base. If you check our growth is not, the growth doesn't cut across structure. You see, largely financial and telecoms, driving growth, but it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be just few sector service-led growth. No, we should also focus on other sector. Let the growth be broadened, right? So the last point I want to also raise is on opportunities. We have opportunities to focus on tradable services sector. And we have ICT is a big one in Nigeria. We have some unicorns and doing well in the financial space. So I think we can also leverage on that. There's this idea I used to have on business outsourcing. If you check, for instance, Bangladesh, right? If you check Bangladesh, they are big on that. It's just getting your the fiber network working correctly, and we can export these services. We can export business processing, business outsourcing. You just sit in Nigeria, and international companies bring their bring their services to you. You can work on these things and get effects from that. I think these are avenues which the government needs to actually take important, to also help the country to grow. And by so doing, the citizens and the businesses will be happy. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Ogibe. Very, very good. Well, okay. I guess we are now at the end of the webinar, which I find to be extremely enriching, very incisive, and the presentation itself, the main presentation itself is very, very comprehensive. The contributions by our panelists, we miss the honorable, but I'm sure there'll be another opportunity in future. But the contributions by Doctors Viola and Ogibe, they have been very, very spot on and very precise. I believe that this process is being recorded, and therefore ADSR will certainly make the best use of it. So by way of my own, take, I think the important point to me is that reforms are necessary, but we should be careful the pace of the reform. And that point was raised by Dr. Ogibe, that look, in a market economy, you don't do, you don't jump in leaps. You move marginally so that the various agents in the economy can respond appropriately and manage, the consequences. It also gives room for the point also made, which is that, and that's by Dr. Where if you are gradualist in your approach, then you have space to then begin to talk about whether you want to sustain, slow down, or actually even reverse. But when you make a very lumpy change, reversing that kind of lumpy change can be very, very challenging, and in fact to an extent impossible. So in order not to lock ourselves up in an irreversible process, maybe a gradualist approach is important. The emphasis on this export-led growth is also very, very useful. But what are we exporting? I think that is what we should also be careful. Let us not continue to export raw materials. Let us ensure that we can add value to everything that is in their natural state before we start moving them out. Because under the pressure to begin to earn foreign exchange, we may then start shipping out things in their natural state, which is completely against the development process. The argument against RSI is neither here nor there. It's not settled, because we have seen that in the past there was a swing towards RSI, then there was a swing away from it. But experience is showing that these extremes is not the best. The best is to ensure that you move up the value chain. The value chain approach is what is now being considered. So if you want to move up the value chain, you must therefore be able to produce the raw material, add value to it locally before you start talking about exporting after you have met your local, demand. Because export is actually normally the surplus between your production and your domestic demand. That was you have it. And now you see a country like China now is not trying to internalize, the drivers of its, development by increasing domestic consumption. So let us therefore be very, careful in pushing, the argument against ISI. Instead, let us working on enhancing our own portion of the value chain, so that we don't remain at the tail end of it and begin to work for others. Let us work for ourselves by creating jobs, by creating, enabling environment for our businesses, so that we can produce and export. Otherwise, I think I'd like to thank the ADRS for this opportunity. First of all, the initiative is extremely welcome, and I believe that the results, which they can then circulate in their own, regular channel, we also begin to have at least some kind of impact on the thinking process of our leaders. And then I also like to thank all the, presenters, Dr. Yinka and Joseph, for these very, very, excellent presentations and contributions. Professor Badon, and then Professor Olusoye, I thank you also for your very, very, incisive contribution, and I hope all this will be put together by the management of analyst data resources and services, so that we can all benefit maximally from it. Again, thank you very much. I hand over back to Peace or Dodo, or both of you.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for that. Okay, so thank you, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate. We thank our presenter and also the panelists, like Prof said. Thank you for creating time. Also, our viewers to join us at this time. The communique is prepared to be shared to us across our social media platforms, and also you can rewatch via YouTube live stream currently. You can go back and rewatch and get to those points. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day, everyone.